For those who are looking for a stable outcome of the Israel-Hezbollah war, the two key equations remain: who wins the war and who wins the diplomatic aftermath. Perhaps even more critical than whether Israel or Hezbollah wins the war is the question: who will come out on top of the political settlement, Hezbollah or the government of Lebanon? That could determine not just the future of Israeli-Lebanese relations, but the state of play in the region as a whole. With Fuad Signora's Lebanese government at best in a tie with the militant Islamist group, many Israelis increasingly have the feeling that this is a war that is only now just beginning. That might sound very harsh to the suffering Lebanese people and the suffering Israeli people, who have both taken a battering as the bloody battles continue uninterrupted into a second month. But that feeling that the war is only now just beginning is a growing conception within the Israeli public. It also informs a growing public demand of the Olmert government to adopt a tougher approach still. A couple of days ago, an F-16 fighter pilot, identified only as Neri, was interviewed on Israel radio. The situation, he said, is all upside down. When I return from a mission, rather than my mother's SMS to me asking if I'm safe, the family priority is my urgent SMS to her in Haifa, asking her if she's okay after more Katyusha rockets rained down on our town. The pilot went on: most of my colleagues are politically either middle grounders or on the left of the political spectrum. But there's a growing sense among all of us that the time has come to take the gloves off, to stop fighting with one hand tied behind our backs. This is a war against Hezbollah, yes, but Hezbollah, he said, has entrenched itself in Lebanon. And if the Lebanese haven't sufficiently understood the dangers of allowing Hezbollah to fight for them, then perhaps they need to understand the dangers a little more clearly. At the beginning of the week, the Lebanese government was at a critical crossroad. Should it accept or reject the joint French-US draft resolution at the United Nations on how to end the fighting? Prime Minister Fuad Signora proposed a fairly deft response to the challenge. He put on the table his own 7-point plan, including implementation of Security Council Resolution 1559, which calls for Lebanese sovereignty to be extended throughout the country, and critically, for the dispatch of the Lebanese army to the south, close to the Israel border. It is no small matter for a Lebanese government to be adopting a position which for the first time doesn't depend on Syrian consent, and which in many ways even threatens Syrian interests. At root, there's still a great fear in Israel that will again slide into the Lebanese bog, as it's called, should the army be pushed further north into Lebanon in order to root out the Katyusha's rockets, on average still landing at the rate of 200 a day, and which are mostly fired from a 30 to 40 kilometer range north of the border. And it remains true that this Israeli government is intensely against any long-term occupation of any part of Lebanon. Increasingly, however, despite that, the conception is that the missile threat will not be removed without a powerful ground action. So, with former generals, right-wing politicians, and the majority of the public urging that that goal be forcibly secured, the Olmert government was under pressure of its own kind on Wednesday as it faced a critical crossroad of its own. Although the Security Cabinet endorsed in principle by a vote of 9-0 with 3 abstentions the Army's plan for a broad-scale ground offensive against Hezbollah in South Lebanon, following a lengthy conversation with U.S. Secretary of State Condoleezza Rice, which punctuated the 6-hour meeting, Olmert staved off implementation of the new offensive in order to give diplomatic efforts at the United Nations another chance to succeed. It was as if Israel was telling the international community, hold us back. We don't want to expand this war, but you have an alternative. An equitable diplomatic program put speedily in place and including an international force with a strong mandate to stand up to Hezbollah. What's indeed markedly different from any of Israel's previous Lebanese wars or campaigns is that this time the Israeli government believes that for all the strength of its military actions, its objectives, namely removing Hezbollah from the border area, eliminating the rocket threat, and eventually disarming Hezbollah, can finally only be secured by diplomatic means, not so much on the battleground. Even the military accepts that truism. But it applies an addendum. Unless Hezbollah is seriously degraded on the battleground, there is no chance of either it or its Syrian and Iranian backers allowing the Lebanese government to acquiesce in any UN decisions. That's the army's position, and this approach is reflected in the forthright declaration of the right-wing former Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, who said, "It's absolutely essential that we win a decisive victory over Hezbollah." Nonsense counters the Israeli left. The left is now emerging from the broad consensus which until now, during this war, has enveloped Israel, and has thus begun to speak out strongly against further military actions. Here the argument is there is no such thing as the destruction of Hezbollah. So, going into this weekend, Israel finds itself at a real crossroads. Will there be broader action, or will there be a diplomatic solution brought forth at the United Nations as a basis for holding Israel back? But beyond being a vital moment for Israel, it could also turn into be a critical crossroad for the entire region, and indeed for the international community as a whole.